Imagine a country that doesn't officially exist at night. From a satellite's eye view, as the Earth rotates into darkness, the Korean peninsula glows with lights, highways, cities, bustling ports. South Korea beams like a beacon of modern civilization, and then, a void, a black hole of silence. No lights, no movement, just shadow. That shadow is North Korea, but what truly hides in that darkness? What happens behind its carefully crafted illusions? And more importantly, why has the world allowed it to stay hidden for so long? North Korea is the most secretive nation on Earth, a state built on absolute control, cult-like worship, and fear sculpted into daily life. It is a country where an offhand comment can mean death, where a missed portrait bow can erase your family from existence. A place where time, truth, and identity are rewritten not by memory, but by decree. But here's the question no one dares ask: if you were born there, would you even know you were a prisoner? Let's begin. The story of North Korea doesn't start with Kim Jong-un, or even his father, Kim Jong-il. It starts in the ashes of World War II, in the division of a country carved by superpowers, and in a man named Kim Il-sung, who took the throne not by democratic will, but by myth. From the moment Kim Il-sung seized power in 1948, North Korea began rewriting reality. His birth was said to have been foretold by a rainbow and accompanied by a double sunrise. He could reportedly ride horses before he could walk. These stories weren't folklore. They were mandatory belief. By the 1950s, schools began each morning, with children praising the great leader. Textbooks described him as a revolutionary god. History lessons omitted anything that contradicted his legend. Outside books, forbidden radios, pre-tuned to government stations, the calendar itself was reset, starting not from Christ's birth, but from Kim's. This wasn't governance. It was worship under surveillance. Even the homes in North Korea reflect control. Every household, regardless of income, must display portraits of the ruling Kim family, often 2 or 3, immaculately framed. Inspectors visit unannounced to check for dust on the frames. If found, consequences follow. A smudge on a leader's photo isn't negligence, it's treason. But what makes this more chilling is how the control is embedded in love, or what looks like it. Children genuinely cry during national events, not from fear alone, but because they've been taught that their leader is their father, savior, and protector. When Kim Jong-il died in 2011, mass hysteria swept the streets. People collapsed, screaming. One woman was later imprisoned for not mourning intensely enough. How do you rebel against something that's wrapped in the language of love? As Kim Jong-il took over from his father, the system evolved, but only in how deeply it penetrated life. Surveillance reached every corner. Children reported parents. Neighbors turned in neighbors. Everyone belonged to Inminbun, or neighborhood watch units. These weren't for crime prevention. They were for ideological purity, and it worked. By the 1990s, the country was crumbling. The Soviet Union had collapsed, and North Korea's economy with it. Famine swept the nation. Official estimates are vague, but defectors claim up to 3 million people died from starvation, nearly 15% of the population. And yet, the people didn't revolt. Why? Because they believed, truly believed, that the outside world was worse. They had been told their suffering was noble, necessary, and temporary. They believed South Korea was filled with orphans, begging on the streets, that Americans drank blood, that the world envied North Korea's purity. But here's the twist. Even as people starved, they smiled for cameras. Foreigners were given carefully choreographed tours, spotless schools with staged classes, happy farmers, pristine hospitals with no patients. These weren't real lives. They were theatrical sets, and the actors, ordinary citizens forced to perform perfection under the threat of death. One defector described it like this: every time a foreigner came, we rehearsed our lines. We were told to smile, to clap, to lie. We didn't lie because we wanted to. We lied because the truth would kill us. But cracks began to form. In the early 2000s, DVDs smuggled from China began leaking into the country. South Korean dramas, Hollywood films, pirated USB. For the first time, North Koreans saw clean streets, fat children, abundance. One young defector said she realized the government had lied when she saw a South Korean film with a poor girl throwing away rice. I thought even their poor have rice. Curiosity turned into quiet rebellion. Small black markets, known as Gangmodong, began to form. Women led these underground economies, trading Chinese goods, foreign cosmetics, even memory cards. The regime cracked down, but it was too late. Information had entered the bloodstream. And once the mind awakens, it does not sleep again. But don't mistake this for a revolution. The consequences for dissent remain catastrophic. North Korea doesn't just imprison individuals, it punishes generations. If one person commits a crime against the state, their children and grandchildren can be sentenced to labor camps. These are places of horror, forced starvation, rape, beatings, execution. Some camps are so secret their locations don't exist on official maps. Defectors speak of entire families vanishing overnight, of children raised behind barbed wire, never knowing the sky without fences, of women giving birth in mud and being forced back to work within hours. It's not dystopia, it's real. And it's happening now. So how does the outside world respond? Mostly, it doesn't. Sanctions are imposed, condemnations issued. But North Korea continues, because its greatest weapon isn't its military. It's secrecy. They've built a prison so complete that most inmates don't even know they're imprisoned. Visitors to Pyongyang, the only city foreigners are typically allowed to see, describe it as surreal. Streets are spotless. People wear suits and traditional dress, but dig deeper, and strangeness appears. No trash cans yet, no trash. No internet cafes, no teenagers texting, no random conversations. Everyone seems to be walking a silent script. One traveler recalled asking a local man what music he liked. The man froze, then responded, "Whatever the dear leader likes." It wasn't sarcasm, it was survival. So how do people escape? Barely. The border with South Korea is nearly impossible to cross. Fortified with mines, soldiers, and electrified fences. Most defectors flee north, into China, hoping to reach South Korea through underground networks. But even there, danger stalks them. China doesn't recognize them as refugees. If caught, they are sent back, where torture, imprisonment, or execution awaits. And yet, people risk it. One woman crawled through mountains in winter, with her baby wrapped in plastic bags to keep warm. Another swam across a river in the dark, guided only by the sound of dogs barking on the other side. A teenager walked for days, with bleeding feet, surviving on scraps, never speaking a word for fear of being overheard. They did this not for glory, not for politics, but for a chance to taste freedom. And here's the haunting thought. If these are the ones who made it out, what of the millions who never will? What stories will never be told? What pain remains buried in silence, waiting to be seen? As we close this first chapter, ask yourself, how much of what you believe is freedom? Is simply the privilege of being born outside the cage? North Korea isn't just a dictatorship. It's a mirror reflecting back to us what happens when power is unchecked, when truth is controlled, and when fear becomes faith. The next chapter dives deeper. We'll explore the twisted inner workings of the Kim dynasty, the elite inner circle that thrives while the people suffer, and the chilling future of a country where reality itself is weaponized. Don't miss it. Subscribe now, because what you'll hear next, they've tried desperately to keep hidden. You've heard the stories, you've seen the satellite photos, but nothing prepares you for what it feels like to stand inside the machine, to breathe the air of a place so carefully scripted, so flawlessly orchestrated, that even your own thoughts begin to feel like they're not yours. This is not just a country, it's a stage, and every citizen is born into a role they never chose. The capital city, Pyongyang, is unlike any other place on earth. Wide, empty boulevards, towering statues of smiling dictators, synchronized morning workouts, children marching in perfect step on their way to school. You begin to wonder, is this discipline or choreography? Foreign visitors are carefully watched, their movements strictly managed. You are never alone. Always shadowed by two minders, one to guide, the other to observe. They smile politely. They insist you see the victorious Fatherland Liberation War Museum, where the Korean War is portrayed as a glorious triumph over American invaders. But ask the wrong question, and the smiles vanish. What do people do for fun? Here, silence. Are you allowed to watch foreign movies? A blank stare. Do you ever wish to travel abroad? And then the answer? Why would we leave paradise? It would be laughable, if it weren't so tragic. Because here's what they won't show you. There are no disabled people in Pyongyang. Not because there are none, but because they've been relocated to rural areas, far from the view of visitors. The regime sees them as imperfections, a blemish on the myth of racial and ideological purity. In this kingdom of illusion, suffering must be hidden, reality must be cleansed. Even romance is controlled. Marriage is not just a private union, it's a state decision. Couples must seek government approval. Your political loyalty, family background, and class standing are all taken into account. Love doesn't conquer all here. Love must be authorized. Now imagine being born into this. From the moment you enter school, your life is planned. You wear a red scarf, the symbol of the Korean Children's Union, and you chant songs of loyalty to the supreme leader. You learn that Kim Jong-un doesn't use the bathroom because he is too pure, that he learned to drive at age 3, that he wrote 1,500 books in college. You believe this? Not because you're stupid, but because everyone around you believes it too. When everyone lies together, the lie becomes truth. And so, the illusion deepens. North Korean television is a daily performance. News anchors read reports in near hysterical voices, praising the achievements of the government. Today, dear leader guided the successful launch of a satellite. Even if the rocket exploded, farmers harvested record grain. Even during famine, the truth doesn't matter. Only the narrative does. And who controls that narrative? The Kim dynasty. To understand North Korea, you must understand the terrifying genius of its ruling family. because they didn't just build a dictatorship, they built a religion. Kim Il-sung, the founding father, is still technically the president of North Korea. He died in 1994, but they named him Eternal President. His son Kim Jong-il is Eternal General Secretary, and Kim Jong, the current leader, is portrayed as the living embodiment of their will. They are not seen as leaders, they are gods. Their portraits hang in every classroom, every office, every train station. Every citizen must bow before them. On Kim Il-sung's birthday, known as the Day of the Sun, the entire country participates in ceremonies of praise. If you forget to show up, it's not absence. It's blasphemy. And blasphemy has consequences. There's a term in North Korea, janzagui. It means guilt by association. If you commit a political offense, or even if you're accused of one, your children and grandchildren can be punished too. Families vanish overnight. Their homes are sealed. Their names erased from records. It's as if they never existed. The fear isn't just personal, it's generational, so people learn to obey, to perform, to suppress, even their dreams. But here's what truly breaks the heart. There are people inside this system, kind, intelligent, hopeful people who believe in it with their whole soul, not because they've been forced to, but because they've never known anything else. One defector described it like this: I didn't know I was in a dictatorship. I thought this was how the world worked. And then, one day, she saw a stranger drop a piece of candy on the street that it seems like nothing. But in North Korea, people are starving. She watched in disbelief as a child ran up, picked up the candy, and threw it away. She said, "That was the moment I realized this isn't how life is supposed to be." That crack, that fracture in the illusion, is what starts the journey for many defectors. A whisper of doubt, a glimpse of another life, a question that won't go away. But escaping is more than physical. It means leaving behind everything you've ever known. Your language, your family, your culture. It means living with guilt, because you survived when others didn't. It means never being truly free, because the regime hunts defectors abroad. Some have been assassinated, others silenced. The fear doesn't end at the border. So people risk it, because once you taste the truth, you can't untaste it. In recent years, underground networks have grown bolder. Smugglers sneak in flash drives loaded with foreign films, documentaries, even YouTube videos. They're hidden inside shampoo bottles, rice sacks, stuffed toys. North Koreans watch in secret, their curtains drawn, the volume low, their fingers trembling. One young man watched a documentary about South Korea. He cried for an hour, not because it was sad, but because it showed what life could be, what he had been denied. He said, "They have hospitals with lights, clean streets, people smile. They aren't afraid." That's all it took to shatter a lifetime of propaganda, a smile. But let's not pretend this is over. For every person who escapes, there are thousands still trapped, still performing, still bowing, still starving, still hoping in silence. And here's the cruelest part. Even when defectors escape, they are never truly believed. Some in the West question their stories, accuse them of exaggeration, ask, how could anyone believe such obvious lies? But that question reveals more about us than them, because if you were born inside the lie, would you even know? As this second chapter closes, let's reflect. North Korea is not just a place, it's a warning. A warning about what happens when power becomes myth, when truth becomes optional, and when fear becomes the foundation of society. It's a living museum of totalitarianism, and the most terrifying part is, it still functions. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper. We'll expose the elite class, the Pyongyang privileged few, and explore how they live in luxury, while the rest of the country drowns in scarcity. We'll reveal the black markets, the secret parties, and the forbidden pleasures that only the chosen few get to taste. Because even in a prison this vast, there are kings and pawns, and the pawns are starting to see the cracks. Subscribe now, because the truth they fear the most is the one we're about to uncover next. There's a place in North Korea most of its people will never see. A world hidden inside the capital. It doesn't look like the North Korea you've heard about. No hunger, no broken shoes, no fear on the faces. This version is manicured, modern, and full of illusions. Welcome to the world of the elite. They call it Pyongyang privilege, the quiet empire of the loyal few. These are the ones who serve the regime, not with guns or slogans, but with unbreakable obedience. They live in high-rise apartments with running water, access to stores with real food, foreign cosmetics, even cell phones, though all heavily monitored, while the rest of the country eats corn, porridge, and burns hay for warmth. The elite drive black Mercedes and dine on imported seafood. Their children attend elite universities where they learn foreign languages, coding, and nuclear science. But not for the world's benefit. These minds are trained to serve the dynasty, to build weapons, not futures. But who are they? They are the inner circle, senior military officers, scientists, propaganda writers, border guards who haven't flinched in decades. Loyalty is their currency, and treason their death sentence. They are not stupid. They know the truth. They've seen the outside world through forbidden screens, heard the whispers from defectors, read reports hidden behind closed doors, but they stay. Why? Because power in North Korea is oxygen. And once you have it, losing it means more than poverty. It means erasure. To fall from grace in Pyongyang is to fall completely. One wrong word, one missed cue, one facial expression during a parade, and you're gone. Your home reassigned, your family punished, your name deleted from public records. The state doesn't just destroy your body, it dissolves your existence. So they smile, they clap, they repeat the same tired lies, louder than ever. Because in a land where truth kills, performance is survival, but not everyone plays the game. Behind the marble floors of the elite apartments and the bronze statues that scrape the sky, a quiet resistance simmers. It starts with whispers. In small apartments, under the drone of government news, young people gather to watch South Korean dramas. Smuggled on USB sticks, they cry at love stories, marvel at glittering cities, laugh at jokes they barely understand. They watch not because of the acting, but because it proves something their government tried to erase. A different life is possible. For many, it's the first time they've seen a woman drive a car, a family eat together around a dinner table, or a couple kiss in public. These images don't just entertain, they shatter the illusion. But it's dangerous. Watching foreign media is a crime. Owning a USB stick with South Korean content can mean forced labor or even execution, and yet it spreads. Like a virus of truth, like hope passed from hand to hand. One young man described it like this: "When I saw the South Korean news for the first time, I was confused. It wasn't angry. There was no shouting. The anchors spoke calmly, and they smiled. I didn't know news could sound like that." He paused. Then I realized I'd never heard a real smile before. This quiet awakening doesn't stop at the TV screen. It leaks into the underground markets. The Jangmadang. These are not just places to buy rice or soap. They are epicenters of forbidden exchange, where information, goods, and rumors travel. Faster than state propaganda, run mostly by women, these markets defy everything the regime teaches. They operate outside government control. They use unofficial currency. They even have their own justice systems. If the state represents the lie, the market represents survival, and the regime knows this. That's why they crack down hard. Inspections, arrests, public punishments. But even as they try to crush the markets, they rely on them. Why? Because the formal economy is dead. Factories barely function. Salaries mean nothing. Without the black markets, even loyal citizens would starve. So the regime walks a tightrope, suppressing what it secretly needs to survive. But the contradictions don't end there. In elite circles, the sons of generals host secret parties with forbidden Western alcohol. Daughters of diplomats post photos with iPhones behind VPN firewalls. The most powerful young people in Pyongyang live double lives, chanting slogans by day, watching Netflix by night. This isn't freedom, it's quiet rebellion. Controlled, careful, but rebellion nonetheless. And it raises a terrifying question: what happens when the privileged start to believe the lie is no longer worth protecting? Kim Jong-un knows this. That's why his surveillance doesn't stop at the poor. He watches the rich even more closely. Loyalty isn't assumed, it's audited. When Jang Song-thaek, Kim's own uncle, was accused of disloyalty in 2013, the punishment was swift and brutal. He was executed by anti-aircraft gun. In public, his body vaporized, his name erased, his entire family purged. It sent a message: no one is untouchable, and that message echoed across Pyongyang like a gunshot. Fear returned, smiles tightened, went deeper underground. But what about the rest of the country? Outside the capital, the illusion fades. There are villages where electricity hasn't worked in years. Children who've never seen a working light bulb. Families that eat tree bark in winter to survive. People who have never heard the sound of music not written by the state. For them, there is no underground party, no iPhone, no Jangmadang, only work, hunger, silence. One defector from a border village described her childhood like this: "I thought the stars were candles in the sky. I didn't know what electricity was." And another said, "When I crossed into China, I saw my reflection in a glass door for the first time. I cried. I didn't know what I looked like." These are not just stories. They are the reality for millions. The regime tries to keep these worlds apart, the elite and the forgotten, because if they ever connect, the lie collapses. So how do they prevent the spark? Fear, random inspections, loyalty tests, mandatory events where citizens must praise the regime in writing. Children are told to write weekly essays about how they would die for Kim Jong-un. Teachers collect them. The essays are graded. The best are read aloud. Imagine growing up in that where your creativity is measured by how well you can fake devotion. But here's the truth: the regime fears most people are waking up, slowly, silently, but undeniably they are questioning the sermons, laughing at the slogans, sharing the USBs, whispering the forbidden names of family members who disappeared, holding on to the tiniest flickers of memory, of identity, of resistance. And that's how it always begins. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. A mother telling her child a bedtime story, not written by the state. A teenager drawing a heart in a schoolbook. A neighbor lending a band song for just 5 minutes of listening. In a land where even dreams are policed, The tiniest act of imagination becomes a revolution. And so we ask, how long can the illusion survive when the people behind it are starting to see through the glass? In our next chapter, we'll go deeper into the most terrifying piece of the puzzle, the labor camps. We'll reveal what happens to those who fall from favor, to those who question the story, and to the generations born behind barbed wire. It's a place few have escaped, and fewer still have lived to talk about. But we will tell their story. Subscribe now, because the darkest truths are the ones the regime tried hardest to bury, and we're about to dig them up. There's a part of North Korea you'll never see in documentaries or parades. A place not drawn on official maps, hidden even from the citizens who live nearby. Its fences stretch for miles. Its watchtowers dot the horizon. Its silence is heavier than any wall. These are the Kwanliso, the political prison camps. To call them prisons would be a kindness. They are hellscapes built not just to punish, but to erase. Erase dissent. Erase identity. Erase hope. You are not sentenced to a number of years here. You are sentenced to disappear. There are estimated to be between 80,000 and 120,000 people in these camps. Some are guilty of crimes, though crime in North Korea can mean speaking the wrong word, folding a newspaper over a photo of the supreme leader, or simply having the wrong last name. Others are guilty by association. Children, parents, cousins of someone who once asked a forbidden question. One defector told us, "My only crime was being born into the wrong family." Inside the camps, the rules are simple. Work until you collapse, then get up and work again. You wake before the sun. You line up in silence. Guards with rifles bark orders. You march to the fields, to the mines, to the frozen mountains. You carry stones, you dig trenches, you clear forests with your hands. There are no machines, only bodies. If you fall behind, you're beaten. If you speak out, you vanish. If you try to escape, you die. And yet, even death isn't the worst fate here, because in these camps, you are not just starved of food, you are starved of meaning. You forget your name. You forget what music sounds like, what laughter feels like, what hope ever was. Time becomes a blur of suffering, broken only by the occasional flicker of memory, a mother's voice, a moment of sun on your face, a dream you no longer dare to believe in. There are children here too, born behind fences. Born without documents, without birthdays, without futures. One survivor described it like this: "I thought the world was only mountains, cold, and hunger. I didn't know there were countries where people smiled, and it gets worse." The regime uses public executions to instill obedience. Inmates are forced to watch. Sometimes, a man is accused of stealing a handful of corn. Other times, a woman whispers a forbidden word. The punishment is the same: death in front of hundreds. They are not allowed to look away. They must applaud. Imagine being a child, ordered to clap for the death of your own father. This isn't fiction, this is policy. The guards are not just jailers, they are engineers of fear. They study psychology. They understand how to break the human mind. Prisoners are pitted against one another. A man's sentence can be reduced if he informs on his cellmate. A child is rewarded for denouncing her mother. Trust dies first, then dignity, then the soul. But here's the horror that stretches even further. The camps don't just punish the present, they erase the future, because if you're born in a Kwanliso, you may never leave. You'll live your whole life behind fences, believing the world beyond is a myth. You'll raise children who know no other sky, and you'll die not as a citizen, but as a ghost in a system that denies your existence. When defectors speak about the camps, many break down, not just because of what happened, but because no one believed them. "People told me it was impossible," one survivor said. "They thought I was lying. I wanted to scream. I wish the first was lying." Some called her dramatic. Others said it sounded too much like the Holocaust. She looked them in the eye and said, "That's the point. It is like the Holocaust, and it's still happening. Let that sink in." In the 21st century, in a world of satellites, smartphones, and 24-hour news, a government is running death camps, and the world mostly looks away. Why? Because North Korea is isolated. It controls every image, every voice, every window in and out. No journalists. No independent organizations. No witnesses who can't be silenced. But silence is not the same as absence. We know these places are real, because of the brave few who escaped. Shin Dong-hyuk is one of them. He was born in Camp 14. He saw his mother and brother executed. He was tortured for days in a concrete cell, burned with hot coals, forced to witness atrocities beyond imagination, and yet he escaped. He crawled through an electric fence, he walked for days, and when he finally reached South Korea, he said something chilling. "I didn't run to be free. I didn't even know freedom existed. I just wanted a meal that didn't come with beatings." And when he finally tasted chicken for the first time, he cried, not because it was delicious, but because it didn't come from a guard's garbage. The trauma didn't end when he escaped. He struggled with guilt, with nightmares, with the weight of knowing that thousands still remain where he once stood. He became a human rights activist, telling his story again and again. Even as others tried to discredit him, he was not perfect. No one is, but his pain was real. His voice, undeniable. And there are others. women who were raped by guards, then forced to give birth in secret, men who worked in coal mines so deep their skin turned gray, children who never learned to write their names. These stories are not isolated, they are the heartbeat of a system built on silence. And so we ask again, how is this still allowed to happen? Because it is hidden, because it is inconvenient, because we've learned to compartmentalize horror, to look away when it's too far, too foreign, too uncomfortable. But North Korea is not Mars. It is a country, with roads, with faces, with stories that deserve to be heard, and the labor camps are its darkest secret. The regime will deny them. They'll say these people are criminals, traitors, foreign spies. But we've seen the satellite images, the testimonies, the scars. We've heard the sobs of mothers who lost their children to a lie. What more do we need? This is not just a human rights crisis. It is a moral test. Do we care about freedom? Only when it's easy? Do we care about suffering? Only when it fits into our news cycle? Do we believe in truth, even when it's buried under fear? If the answer is yes, then we must speak louder, share more, shine light where the regime has built walls. In our final chapter, we'll explore the future, the cracks forming in the regime, the digital rebellion rising among the youth, and the question that haunts us all, can North Korea ever be free? And if so, what would that even look like? Subscribe now, because the final wall may already be crumbling, and we need to be ready when the truth breaks through. For decades, North Korea has stood like a monument to fear, a perfectly sealed jar of silence, unreachable, untouchable, unchangeable. But even the strongest walls crack. Even the darkest lies flicker when truth begins to seep through. And now, something is shifting. The regime wants you to believe it is eternal, that Kim Jong-un will rule forever, that the people are content, that the myth is unbreakable. But inside, the illusion is wearing thin. Not through rebellion in the streets, not through guns or marches, but through something far more dangerous. Questions. A teenage girl in Pyongyang secretly listens to K-pop on a smuggled USB stick. The melody is strange, addictive, different. For the first time, her heartbeat sinks to something not approved by the state. She doesn't say anything out loud, but in her mind, something begins to whisper. Why don't we have this? A young soldier along the Chinese border sees glittering lights across the river. Cities that shine, people who laugh, stores filled with color and food. He was taught to believe these were lies. But the lights are real, they do not blink out. And each night he watches longer. A factory worker receives a phone call illegally from a cousin who escaped to the south. The voice on the other end says, I'm alive, I'm free, and I miss you. The worker weeps, not because of the danger, but because for one brief moment, the world was real again. These are not uprisings, they are awakenings, and the regime fears them more than tanks. Because you can kill a man, but you cannot kill a question. And across North Korea, those questions are multiplying. Why do our leaders live in palaces while we eat roots? Why do they tell us the world is dying when we see South Koreans dancing on TV? Why do we clap for men who never hear our cries? The digital revolution is leaking through the cracks. Balloon drops from South Korea. Radio broadcasts smuggled on hidden frequencies. Flash drives passed hand to hand in whispered trust. Cell phones used to film, to call, to prove that the world outside is not a myth. The regime cracks down harder. They execute. They torture. They vanish the curious. But curiosity survives. Because once you've tasted truth, no matter how small, no matter how dangerous it becomes, part of you it cannot be unlearned, it cannot be erased. Kim Jong-un knows this. That's why the regime is evolving. No longer content to rule by fear alone, they've begun experimenting with something new. Distraction, mass, games with perfect choreography, new amusement parks, a rising wave of modern buildings in Pyongyang, a tightly controlled internet, called Kwangmyang, where citizens can search but only within the state's sandbox. It's not freedom, it's a prettier cage. But the fact they feel the need to build it means they feel the pressure. They know the myth is fraying. They know the people are asking. And so they polish the lie, hoping the gloss will hold. But it won't, because outside the world is watching. And inside, the people are waking up. Not all of them, not loudly, not yet. But the cracks are there, and through those cracks, something is rising. Hope. Hope in the face of absolute control is radical. It is rebellion. It is sacred. When a child dares to dream of becoming something other than a soldier, or a servant, that is revolution. When a mother tells her daughter, you are allowed to think, that is revolution. When a man risks everything to carry truth across a border in a USB, a phone call, or a balloon, that is revolution. But hope alone is not enough. Which brings us to us, you and me. What do we do? Because it's easy to watch a video, to feel sad, to shake your head and say, that's awful, and then scroll to the next story. But behind every fact in this series is a face. Behind every prison camp is a child crying quietly in the snow. Behind every propaganda parade is a girl forced to smile until her jaw aches. Behind every silence is a scream that couldn't escape. So we cannot afford to look away. We must share their stories, amplify their voices, Support organizations that help defectors. Demand accountability from governments who stay silent because it's politically inconvenient. And more than anything, we must keep telling the truth, because the regime is terrified of truth. Terrified that one day, the lies will collapse under their own weight. Terrified that their own people will look each other in the eye and say, "We were deceived." But we are not alone. North Korea doesn't need invasion. It needs light. It needs the steady, unstoppable force of truth, compassion, and courage. There will be setbacks. The regime will fight to the last breath. But history has taught us, no wall, no matter how high or brutal, can withstand a rising tide forever. The Berlin Wall fell. The Iron Curtain dissolved. And one day, so will this. And when that day comes, when the fences come down, and the silence lifts, and the world finally sees the faces behind the myths, we must be ready. Ready not to judge, but to help. Because after generations of darkness, they will need light. They will need healing. They will need to remember what it means to be human, and they will need us. So don't forget this story. Don't let it fade. Let it change you, because change starts not with power, but with attention. With a whisper that grows into a voice, with a single truth that refuses to die. So if you've made it this far, ask yourself, what will you do now that you know? Will you be another viewer, or will you be a voice? This was Inside North Korea. The secrets they don't want you to see. Now they know you've seen. And that changes everything. Subscribe, share, speak, because silence is the regime's greatest weapon, and you just took it away.